My name is Geneviève Dubois. For 15 years, I have been a successful architect in Paris, a woman who designs buildings of glass and steel, structures built on the unwavering principles of physics and integrity. I believed my own life was built on the same solid foundation. My husband, Luc, was the perfect partner. Our daughter, Chloe, the beautiful, vibrant heart of our home, and our future, a blueprint of happiness. That entire structure was demolished by a single, innocent question from my 5-year-old daughter. She was playing with her father's phone, and she looked up at me, her face a mask of pure, childish confusion, and asked, "Mom, why does Papa have another family on his phone?" In that moment, the man I loved was revealed to be a stranger, my marriage a lie, and the secure financial future he was supposedly building for us was exposed as a hollowed-out facade, a conspiracy of greed that would threaten to destroy not just my life, but the lives of everyone I loved. Before the question, my life was a masterpiece of Parisian design, chic, elegant, and filled with light. Our apartment, a spacious Haussmannian flat in the 16th arrondissement that I had spent years renovating, offered a breathtaking view of the Eiffel Tower from its wrought iron balcony. It was a home that had been featured in design magazines, a testament to my success, a symbol of the perfect, beautiful life I had built with my husband, Luc. I was a partner at a prestigious architectural firm on the Champs-Élysées, a woman who had broken through in a male-dominated profession through sheer talent and relentless hard work. My days were a demanding balance of managing my team, overseeing complex historical restoration projects, and being a mother to our bright, beautiful 5-year-old Chloe. It was a difficult balance, but it was made possible by one person, my husband. Luc was my foundation. A successful businessman with interests in international import and export, his work required him to travel frequently, but his support for my career was absolute. He was handsome, charming, and utterly devoted to me and to our daughter. He was the man who would have a perfect coq au vin waiting for me after a long day, the man who would listen for hours as I worked through a difficult design problem, the man whose pride in my success was a constant, warming sun in my life. We were a team, a Parisian power couple, the envy of our friends. Our life was a perfect, harmonious composition. Luc's greatest gift to me, or so I believed, was his management of our finances. "Geneviève, my love," he had said to me years ago, "you are the artist, the visionary. Your mind should be free to create. Let me handle the tedious, practical world of accounts and investments. It is my gift to you." I had accepted with a profound, grateful relief. I was an artist, not a financier. He, on the other hand, seemed to have a golden touch. Under his expert management, our wealth grew. He spoke of diversified portfolios, of emerging market opportunities, of a complex financial world I did not need to understand because he understood it for me. My own family, whose wealth came from a celebrated vineyard in Bordeaux, adored him. My parents saw in Luc a worthy steward for our family's future. Just last year, they had given me a substantial portion of my inheritance, a gift of several million euros. It was Luc who had immediately taken charge of it. "We must be smart with this, my love," he had said, his face a mask of grave professional responsibility. "This is not just money. It is your family's legacy. I will place it in a secure family trust invested for low-risk, long-term growth. It will secure Chloe's future and our own for generations." I had been so moved by his sense of duty, his reverence for my family's legacy, I trusted him completely. I signed the papers for the family trust without reading the fine print. Why would I? I was signing a love letter, a testament to our perfect, trusting partnership. In retrospect, the signs were there.
small, almost imperceptible cracks in the flawless facade of our perfect life. Luke's business trips, which had always been a part of our lives, became more frequent, and his explanations of them more vague. He would return from a logistics conference in London, looking more rested than a man who had spent a week in meetings. He became strangely, fiercely protective of his new phone, a separate device he claimed was just for international clients. He would take calls out on the balcony, his back to the room, his voice a low, urgent murmur. If I asked who had called, his answers were always dismissive. Just a difficult supplier. You do not need to worry your beautiful head about it. Once, I found a small, unfamiliar child's toy in the bottom of his travel bag, a little painted wooden train. When I asked him about it, he laughed it off. "Oh, that," he said with a wave of his hand. "It was a free gift on the Eurostar for a client's son. I forgot it was in there." Each incident, on its own, was nothing, a small, explainable anomaly. But together they were a pattern, a series of dissonant notes in a symphony I had believed was perfect. I was an architect. I understood that even the smallest, most insignificant crack can be a sign of a deep structural flaw. But I did not want to see it. I chose to believe in the beautiful structure we had built. I chose to believe in him. The final, masterful stroke of his betrayal began when my mother fell ill. It was a serious, long-term illness that required constant care and complex medical management. In the midst of our family's fear and distress, Luke was a pillar of strength. He took charge of everything. "Geneviève," he said, his face a mask of profound, loving concern, "you must focus on your mother and on Chloe. You are being torn in a dozen different directions. You cannot possibly handle your firm and all of this. Let me help. Let me take the burden." He insisted on taking over the management of my parents' finances as well. "It is all too much for your father to handle in his grief," he argued, his logic impeccable. "Let me consolidate everything, your parents' accounts, our accounts, your inheritance into the single family trust. It will be so much simpler, so much more efficient. It will free us all up to focus on what really matters, your mother's health." It seemed like an act of profound, selfless love. He was the strong, capable man, taking care of his entire beloved family in our darkest hour. My father, overwhelmed by his wife's illness, gratefully handed over control. We were all so thankful for him, for our brilliant, tireless, and utterly devoted Luke. He was not just a husband. He was the hero who was saving us all. The day my world shattered was a beautiful, ordinary Sunday. It was October 5, 2025. Luke was on another urgent business trip to London. My mother was stable, and I was at home enjoying a rare, quiet afternoon with my daughter, Chloe. We were on the sofa, looking at photos on my phone. Chloe, as 5-year-olds do, grew bored and reached for her father's work phone, the international business phone he had accidentally left behind on the charger in his haste to leave. "I want to play my game," she said. I was about to tell her no, that Papa's phone was private, but I was distracted by a work email on my own device. I let her have it. A few minutes passed in peaceful silence, and then she was standing in front of me, holding the phone, its screen glowing. Her small face was a perfect, innocent mask of confusion. "Mom, why does Papa have another family on his phone?" The question did not register at first. "What do you mean, my love?" I asked, my attention still half on my own screen. "Look," she said, and she held up the phone. The lock screen, the first image that appears when the phone is turned on, was not the picture of me and Chloe that adorned his personal phone. It was a photograph I had never seen before. It was a photograph of Luke, his arm wrapped around a woman I did not know. They were in what looked like a sunny town square, smiling, a fountain behind them. And sitting on Luke's lap, a little boy of about 6, his face a miniature, perfect replica of my husband's. They were a family. They looked so happy. The world did not tilt. It did not spin. It simply ceased to exist. In the space of a single silent heartbeat on that Sunday, October 5, 2025, the beautiful, solid structure of my life, the masterpiece of Parisian design I had been so proud of, was utterly and completely demolished. I stared at the glowing screen of my husband's phone, at the image of him smiling with another woman, another child, and my mind, the architect's mind, the mind trained to see structure and logic, went completely blank. Maman. Chloe's small voice pierced the deafening silence. Who is that little boy? I do not remember what I said to her. I remember taking the phone from her hand, my movements stiff and robotic. I remember leading her to her room and turning on a cartoon, a splash of cheerful, idiotic color in a world that had gone gray. Then I returned to the living room, a soldier returning to the scene of a detonation, and I began to sift through the rubble. I sat on the sofa, Luke's business phone in my hand, and for the next several hours I descended into the secret digital life of the man I thought I knew. I guessed his passcode on the third try. It was not our anniversary. It was the other boy's birthday, a date I found watermarked on another photograph. The phone opened, and it was a Pandora's box of a meticulously constructed double life. There was a hidden photo album, password protected, with hundreds of pictures. Luke in Lyon, not London. Luke pushing a little boy named Leo on a swing. Luke kissing a woman named Isabel, a woman with a kind, gentle face, in front of a modest, charming apartment building. There were videos of birthday parties I had not known about, of holidays I had not been a part of. He had not just been having an affair. He had been living a parallel life, a whole other story during his business trips. The personal betrayal was a deep, searing wound, but it was in his emails and his messages that I found the true monstrous scope of his deception. As I dug deeper into the phone, I found the second layer of his betrayal, the one that was colder, more calculated, and in some ways more devastating. I found a separate banking app, a different financial advisor, a whole shadow economy running beneath the surface of our perfect life. The family trust, the sacred vessel that held my inheritance and my parents' legacy, was a sham. It was a complex web of shell corporations and holding companies designed for one purpose: to allow him to move money, our money, my money, with complete, untraceable freedom. I found the emails to his business partners in Lyon detailing how he was using my inheritance to prop up their failing logistics company. I found the bank statements showing massive six-figure transfers from our trust to his personal accounts in Lyon. I found the loan documents revealing that our beautiful Parisian apartment, my masterpiece, the symbol of our success, was mortgaged to the hilt, a fact he had hidden from me with a series of forged documents. We were not wealthy. We were on the verge of total financial ruin. His entire life, the successful international businessman, the brilliant financial manager, was a lie. He was a failure, a fraud, and he had been using my family's fortune, my love, and my trust as a lifeline to keep his sinking ship afloat. The betrayal was not just a matter of the heart, it was a crime of staggering proportions. The most difficult part of my new reality began the moment I heard his key in the door 2 days later. He returned from his trip, his face full of a convincing, travel-weary exhaustion. He swept Chloe into his arms, then came to me, his arms wrapping around me in a familiar, loving embrace that now felt like a cage of snakes. "I missed you, my love," he murmured into my hair. The revulsion that rose in me was so powerful I was afraid I would be sick. But I could not scream. I could not cry. I could not confront him. My mother, in her fragile state, was the hostage in this terrible, silent standoff. The shock of this revelation I knew could kill her. My father, in his grief, was relying completely on Luke's strength. To detonate this bomb now would be to destroy them both. So I did the hardest thing I have ever had to do. I smiled. I kissed him. I asked him about his meetings in London. "Tiring but productive," he lied, his gaze so full of a false, loving sincerity it was a work of art. And so began my own double life. By day, I was the successful architect, the loving wife, the worried daughter. But by night, I was a secret, silent investigator, a ghost in my own marriage, poring over the evidence of my own destruction. The pain of it was a constant, low-grade fever, a sickness in my soul. Every loving word he spoke was a lie. Every touch was a violation. Every night I would lie beside him in the dark, my body rigid with a silent, screaming rage, pretending to be asleep while the stranger beside me, my husband, breathed the peaceful, easy breaths of a man with no conscience. I could not remain completely silent. I began to test him, to probe, to ask questions, a surgeon gently searching for the edges of a tumor. I would ask about our finances, my voice a carefully constructed imitation of a wife's casual curiosity. "Darling, I was just thinking about the trust," I said one evening. "Could you walk me through the latest statements? I feel I should be more involved." His reaction was immediate. A smooth, practiced pivot to psychological manipulation. "Geneviève, my love," he said, his hand covering mine, his face a mask of loving concern. "You have so much on your plate right now. Your mother, your firm, Chloe. You are so stressed. Why are you suddenly worrying about this? Do you not trust me?" The accusation was his shield. My valid questions were framed as a lack of trust, a symptom of my own emotional fragility. I tried a different approach. "It is just a client of mine recently had a terrible experience with a financial manager." I lied. "It has made me a little paranoid." "Paranoid?" he said, his brow furrowed with a deep, convincing worry. "You have been under an unimaginable amount of pressure. Your mother's illness, it is taking a toll. Are you sleeping all right? You seem anxious. You are not thinking clearly. Please, my love, leave the stressful things to me. That is my job. Let me protect you." It was a masterful performance. He was not just a liar. He was a brilliant psychological manipulator. He was taking my genuine, fact-based concerns and reframing them as symptoms of my own mental and emotional decline. He was making me the problem. He was making me feel crazy. The final, devastating escalation came a month later. My mother's condition had taken a sharp turn for the worse. The doctors were recommending a new, prohibitively expensive course of treatment. The financial pressure was now critical. It was into this atmosphere of fear and desperation that Luke delivered his solution. He called a family meeting with me and my father. His face was a mask of grave, sorrowful resolve. "I have been running the numbers," he said, his voice heavy with a false, unbearable weight, "and there is no other way. The trust is illiquid. We cannot access the capital without massive penalties. To fund your mother's treatment, to stabilize the family's finances, we have to sell the vineyard." The vineyard, my family's ancestral home in Bordeaux, a place of sun-drenched hills and centuries of legacy. It was not just a property. It was the heart of my family, the soul of our history.
"No," I whispered, the word a raw, hopeless sound. "Geneviève, we have to," he said, his voice now a firm, authoritative command. He turned to my father, his eyes full of a false filial piety. "It is the only way to save her." My father, a man broken by his wife's illness and completely in awe of his son-in-law's supposed financial genius, simply nodded, his eyes full of a tragic, misplaced trust. "Do what you must, my boy," he said. I was powerless. I was trapped in my own performance, a silent, screaming witness to the final act of my family's destruction. To tell my father the truth now, to tell him that his beloved son-in-law was a fraud and a thief, would be to deliver a shock that his own grieving heart could not withstand. I had to stand there and watch as my husband prepared to sell off the last, most precious piece of my family's legacy, not to save my mother, but to fund his own secret, sordid life of lies. In that moment, the pain was absolute. I had lost my marriage, I was about to lose my family's history, and I was completely and utterly alone. For weeks, I existed in the gray, suffocating fog of my own powerlessness. I was a ghost in my own home, a silent, smiling hostess to the man who was systematically destroying my life. The pain of it was a constant low-grade fever, a sickness of the soul. I was on the verge of breaking, of confronting him, of detonating the bomb and letting the pieces fall where they may, regardless of the consequences for my frail mother. The thing that saved me, the thing that gave me a new, cold and clarifying purpose, was my work. I was in my home office late one night, staring blankly at the blueprints for a complex historical restoration project, a 17th century hotel in the Marais. I was looking at the structural analysis, the pages detailing the building's hidden weaknesses, its crumbling foundations, its rotted supports. The report outlined a process not of simple repair, but of careful, methodical demolition before a new, stronger structure could be built on the old foundation. And in that moment, something shifted. My grief and despair, which had been a chaotic emotional storm, were channeled into a single, clear and analytical focus. I was an architect. I understood structures. And the structure of my life had been compromised by a fatal foundational lie. To save it, I could not just patch the cracks. I had to design a controlled demolition. My husband, Luke, was a flawed structure, and I now had the initial survey of his weaknesses. The architect in me, the woman who had spent a lifetime analyzing problems and designing solutions, finally took over from the heartbroken wife. I would not be a victim in this story. I would be the architect of his downfall. My blueprint for war began that night. I knew I could not execute this plan alone. I needed a different kind of architect, a specialist in demolition. My mind sifted through the contacts of my professional life, the developers, the contractors, the engineers, and then it landed on a name from my past, from my university days, Bastien Legrand. He had been a fellow student, a brilliant, ruthless outsider who had gone into corporate law.
He was now one of the most feared litigators in Paris, a man known for his scorched earth tactics and his absolute unwavering loyalty to his clients. He was perfect.
Getting to him was my first challenge. I used my work as my cover. I told Luc I had an urgent on-site consultation for a new project in Lyon, the very city where he kept his other life. The irony was a small, bitter satisfaction. The meeting took place not in his gleaming corporate office, but in a quiet, discreet café in a forgotten corner of the city. Bastien was as I remembered him, sharp, intense, his eyes missing nothing. I did not weep. I did not ramble. I laid out the case with the precision of an architect presenting a project brief. I showed him the photographs from Luc's phone. I detailed the financial structures, the fraudulent trust, the systematic siphoning of my inheritance. I presented my story not as a personal tragedy, but as a case study in high-level, intimate fraud. He listened, his expression unreadable. When I was done, he was silent for a long moment. "The man is not just an adulterer, Geneviève," he said, his voice a low, dangerous hum. "He is a professional criminal of the highest order, and he is using your love and your family's as his primary weapon." He looked at me, a flicker of something that looked like a warrior's respect in his eyes. "What is your desired outcome?" "My desired outcome," I said, my voice as cold and clear as glass, "is the complete and total demolition of his entire life, followed by a long and painful period of legal and financial reconstruction in a prison cell." A slow, cold smile touched Bastien's lips. "He is an excellent design. Let us begin." Bastien's first instruction was the most difficult. You must go home, and you must continue to be the perfect, slightly stressed, but ultimately trusting wife. You must, in fact, agree to the sale of the vineyard. We must let him believe he is winning, that his plan is proceeding flawlessly. His arrogance is what will make him careless, and we need him to be very, very careless. Returning to Paris, to my apartment, to my life of lies, was the hardest thing I have ever had to do. But I was no longer a passive victim. I was an active operative. I began my performance. I told Luc that I had had a change of heart. "You are right, my love," I said, my voice a convincing imitation of a wife's weary surrender. "My mother's health is the only thing that matters. If selling the vineyard is what it takes, then we must do it. I trust you to handle it." The relief on his face was a sickening spectacle. He was so sure of his own brilliance, his own powers of manipulation, that he did not see the trap that was being laid. He saw only the capitulation he had been waiting for. With my approval secured, he moved forward with the sale, his actions becoming more brazen, his conversations more open. He believed I was a solved problem, a beautiful, sad, but ultimately compliant wife who had finally seen the light of his superior logic. He had no idea the architect was now silently, secretly redrawing all the plans. While I played my part, Bastien's army went to work. He hired a team of the best forensic accountants in France who began a deep dive into the labyrinth of shell corporations Luc had created. He also hired a private investigator, a former DGSE agent, to begin a 24-hour surveillance operation on Luc in both Paris and Lyon. My role was to gather intelligence from the inside. My tools arrived a week later, hidden in the large rolled-up set of architectural blueprints delivered by a courier. Inside the cardboard tube were not just drawings, but a set of state-of-the-art surveillance devices, a sleek, modern desk lamp for the study with a camera hidden in its base, a USB power strip for the living room, its every outlet a microphone. Planting them was a task for which my entire career had been training. I, who had designed this apartment, knew its every secret,
every acoustic sweet spot, every perfect vantage point. I replaced the lamp on the study desk, a simple aesthetic upgrade. I swapped the power strip behind the sofa, a mundane act of household maintenance. My home, the beautiful structure I had designed, was now wired for war, its every room a potential witness box. My nights were now spent in the quiet of my own home office, my own war room, a place Luke never entered. With a tiny earpiece, I would listen to the day's harvest of his deceit, a nightly journey into the dark heart of the man I had married. I listened to him on the phone with his other family in Leo, his voice a warm, loving purr as he promised his son, Leo, a new pony, and his mistress, Isabel, a new life on the Riviera. Just a few more weeks, my love. The big payday from the old family vineyard is coming. Then we are free. I listened to him talking to his shady business partners, his voice a cold, ruthless command, as he detailed how they would move the millions of euros from the vineyard sale through a series of untraceable offshore accounts. The most chilling recording was a conversation he had with his mistress. She was worried about me. "What about Genevieve?" she asked. "What happens when she finds out the money is all gone?"
Luke laughed, a sound that was utterly devoid of humor. "Do not worry about her," he said, his voice a dismissive, cruel wave of the hand. "With her mother so ill, and now the loss of her family's precious vineyard, the poor woman is on the verge of a complete nervous breakdown. By the time her mother is gone, and she finally discovers the truth, she will be so emotionally and psychologically shattered, no one will believe a word she says. They will think she has gone mad. I am not just leaving her, my love. I am leaving her in ruins." It was a confession of a crime far deeper than financial fraud. It was a confession of a deliberate, methodical, and sadistic plot of psychological destruction. I saved the file, my heart not breaking, but hardening into a piece of cold, sharp steel. The closing date for the sale of the Bordeaux vineyard was set. It was the deadline, the ticking clock on my family's legacy. My own mother, in a rare moment of lucidity, seemed to sense the impending doom. I was sitting by her bedside, holding her frail hand, and her eyes, which had been cloudy and distant, suddenly focused on me with a fierce, clear light. "The vineyard," she whispered, her voice a dry, papery rasp. "Your grandfather did not build it for a thief, Geneviève. Do not let that man break you." It was a command from the past, a blessing on the war I was fighting. The final piece of the puzzle came from Bastien's private investigator. He had been digging into Luke's past, into the story of his first great business success. It was a tech startup he had co-founded with his university roommate. The company had been a huge success, but the roommate had, according to the official story, been a troubled genius who had taken his own life just before the company was sold, leaving Luke as the sole beneficiary. The investigator had found the roommate's sister. She had never believed the story. Her brother, she said, had discovered that Luke was a forger, that he had been systematically faking invoices and embezzling from the company. He had been planning to go to the police the week he had died. Luke had not just driven him to suicide, he had likely engineered it. He was not just a thief, he was a man who had a history of destroying anyone who stood in his way. The night before the closing, I had a final, secure video call with Bastien. He had it all. The financial evidence, the recordings, the testimony of the dead partner's sister. He had already presented the entire damning case file to a contact at the Parquet de Paris, the public prosecutor's office. "They are in," he said, his voice a low, triumphant hum. "The trap is set. Not at the closing, at the bank. They want to catch him in the final, irrefutable act of the wire transfer.
Tomorrow, Geneviève, he said, a cold smile on his face, is the day you demolish your husband. The morning of the closing was a masterpiece of deceptive tranquility. A soft autumnal Parisian light filtered through the large windows of our apartment, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The atmosphere was electric with Luc's triumphant, restless energy. He was a man on the verge of his greatest victory, about to secure a fortune and his freedom in one fell swoop. He was charming, attentive, and utterly oblivious to the fact that he was walking into a perfectly designed load-bearing trap. I played my part to the very end. I was the supportive, slightly anxious wife, my feigned concern over the complexity of the wire transfer, a perfect cover for the storm of cold, hard resolve that was raging inside me. I was a coiled spring, a structure under immense, controlled tension, waiting for the precise, calculated moment of release. The journey to the bank was a surreal final act of our married life. Luc drove, his hand resting on my knee in a gesture of proprietal affection that made my skin crawl. He was explaining the intricacies of the offshore accounts, the brilliance of his financial maneuvering, not as a confession, but as a lecture from a master to a novice. "You see, my love," he said, his voice a smooth, condescending purr, "the beauty of this is its complexity. It is like a fine watch, so many moving parts all working in perfect harmony. It is utterly untraceable. You will not have to worry about a thing." "I am sure you have thought of everything, darling," I said, my voice a perfect imitation of a proud, trusting wife. I was not just an actress anymore. I was a judge, listening to the defendant's arrogant and utterly damning final statement. The bank was not a normal bank. It was an exclusive private institution in a historic building on the Place Vendôme, a place of hushed carpets, silent, discreet bankers, and the almost invisible hymn of immense global wealth. This was Luc's world, a place of smoke, mirrors, and the kind of power that believes it is above the law. We were shown into a private wood-paneled office that felt more like a gentleman's club than a bank. The bank manager, a man with a reptilian smile named Monsieur Dubois, was there. The representatives for the buyers of the vineyard, two serious-looking men in dark suits, were also present. And, to my secret grim satisfaction, my lawyer, Bastien, was already there, sitting in an armchair, a leather-bound file on his lap. "Bastien," I said with a practiced, convincing surprise, "what are you doing here?" "Geneviève," he said, rising to kiss my cheeks in the customary French greeting, "your father was worried about the complexity of the transfer. He asked me to be here, just to oversee things on your family's behalf. A second pair of eyes, as it were." I saw a flicker of annoyance in Luc's eyes. His perfect, controlled plan now had an unexpected, unwelcome variable. The architect in me smiled internally. The first crack in his foundation had just appeared. "If you will just sign here, Monsieur Dubois," he said, "the transfer will be executed." Luc picked up the pen, a triumphant, almost sensual smile on his face. This was it, the culmination of his life of lies. "Before you do that, my love," I said, my voice no longer a wife's soft murmur, but an architect's clear, precise, and authoritative command. I placed my hand gently over his, stopping the pen's descent. "I believe, as the co-trustee of this fund, that we need to review the structural integrity of our investment plan." Luc stared at me, his smile faltering. "Geneviève, what are you talking about? This is not the time." "On the contrary, it is the perfect time." I turned to the large, beautifully integrated television screen on the wall. With a small remote I held in my other hand, I brought it to life. I have prepared a brief presentation. The first slide that appeared on the screen was a simple, brutal title, A Structural Analysis of a Deception, and underneath it, Exhibit A, the second family. The image that filled the screen was the one that had started it all, the picture from his phone's lock screen. Luc, with his arm around a woman I now knew was named Isabelle, and a small boy who was his son, in a sunny square in Nyon. Luc's face went white. The bank manager stared, his reptilian smile frozen. Arthur, my son, and Bastien watched, their faces grim and set. I continued, my voice the calm, even tone of a lecturer. Exhibit B, the financial drain. The next slide was a complex, elegant flowchart, a masterpiece of financial forensics created by Bastien's accountants. It showed, with a series of damning red arrows, the flow of millions of euros from my inheritance, from my parents' accounts, from the fraudulent trust, into a series of shell companies, and ultimately, to the failing businesses and personal accounts of Luc Dubois and Isabelle Rousseau in Lyon. You have been a busy man, Luc, I said quietly. Building two lives is, I imagine, a very expensive undertaking. This is insane, Luc finally roared. Finding his voice, he shot to his feet, his face a mask of furious disbelief. Geneviève, you are hysterical. Your mother's illness has clearly broken your mind. This is a fantasy. Is it? I asked, and I clicked to the next slide. Exhibit C, a history of ruin. The slide showed a photograph of a smiling, optimistic-looking young man. His name was Antoine Leclerc, I said, my voice cold as steel. He was your co-founder on your first tech startup, your best friend. He was also, according to the official report, a troubled genius who died by suicide just a week before your company was sold for a fortune, leaving you as the sole beneficiary. Luc stared at the picture of his dead friend, his face a mask of pure, horrified shock. Our investigators, I continued, gesturing to Bastien, found his sister. She never believed the story because she knew that her brother had discovered that you were a forger, that you had been embezzling from the company for months, and that he was planning to go to the police the week he died. It seems, my love, that you have a long and storied history of destroying anyone who discovers your secrets. The revelation of this old, dark secret, the one crime he thought he had buried forever, was what finally broke him. His arrogant denial shattered, replaced by the raw, animal panic of a man who has just had his final escape route cut off. And that, I said, clicking to the final slide, brings me to my concluding remarks. Exhibit D, the confession. I pressed a button on the remote, and the room was filled with the sound of Luc's own voice, captured by the microphone in the desk lamp. It was the recording of his call with his mistress, Isabelle, the one where he had so callously and so confidently detailed his plan to leave me. She will be so emotionally and psychologically shattered, no one will believe a word she says. They will think she has gone mad. I am not just leaving her, my love. I am leaving her in ruins. At the sound of his own cold-blooded words, his own monstrous voice, Luc finally snapped. His panic turned to a blind, cornered rage. He did not lunge at me. He lunged for the laptop on the credenza that was running the presentation, a desperate, futile attempt to smash it, to silence the irrefutable digital proof of his own evil. But before he could take 2 steps, the 2 buyer's representatives moved with a swift professional speed that was anything but that of businessmen. They intercepted him, each grabbing an arm, and slammed him back into his chair with a practiced, unyielding force. At the same moment, the bank manager, Monsieur Dubois, calmly stood up, walked to the conference room door and opened it. But he was not calling for security. He was letting in the lead detective from the Parquet de Paris, who had been waiting in the hallway. And she was not alone. With her was Isabel, Luc's mistress, her face pale and her eyes wide with terror, a detective on either side of her. They had been arrested in a coordinated raid in Lyon that very morning. The two halves of Luc's secret life, the elegant Parisian architect and the devoted mother from Lyon, were now face to face in the ruins of their shared conspiracy. They did not even look at each other. They just stared at him, their expressions a mixture of hatred and contempt. The alliance, if it had ever truly existed, was over. Luc Dubois, the lead detective said, her voice calm and final. You are under arrest for grand larceny, conspiracy to commit fraud, and on suspicion of involvement in the death of Antoine Leclerc. As they pulled him to his feet and cuffed his hands behind his back, he looked at me, his eyes a swirling vortex of disbelief, hatred, and a dawning horrified respect. He had been so sure of his design. He had never imagined that the architect he had betrayed was a better, more patient, and infinitely more ruthless designer than he was.
The chaos of the bank, the arrests, the final ugly shattering of my marriage, it was all followed by a profound, echoing silence. As Luc was led away, his face a mask of utter disbelief, my lawyer, Bastien, guided me through the surreal moments that followed. The bank, the police, the press, it was a storm. But it was a storm I watched from a strange, quiet distance. The architect in me had completed the demolition. Now the woman had to survey the wreckage. The most difficult task was the first one. I had to go to my parents. My father was waiting for me at my mother's bedside in the private clinic. I walked in, and he saw the truth on my face before I said a single word. I did not spare him the details. I laid out the facts with the same cold, clear precision I had used in the bank. The second family, the financial ruin, the systematic betrayal. He listened, his face crumbling, the strong, proud patriarch of our family dissolving into a broken, grieving old man. The trust he had placed in Luc, the man he had treated as a son, had been a catastrophic misjudgment, and the weight of it was a terrible blow. My mother, in her fragile, lucid moments, understood enough. She did not weep. She simply held my hand, her grip surprisingly strong, and looked at me with eyes full of a fierce, sad, and profound love. Her strength, even at the end, was a quiet, unbreakable foundation. The story became a massive scandal in the Parisian financial and social circles. The tale of the brilliant architect, her charming con-man husband, and his secret second life was a lurid, captivating drama. I retreated from the world, my beautiful apartment no longer a home, but a crime scene, a place where every surface was tainted with the memory of a lie. My father and I, now both adrift in a new, lonelier sea, clung to each other. We worked with Bastien and a team of lawyers for years, painstakingly unraveling the complex financial web Luc had woven. We managed to recover a significant portion of my family's fortune, and most importantly, we were able to save the vineyard, the heart of my family's legacy. In the years that followed, I did not just rebuild my life, I redesigned it from the foundation up. I bought a new, smaller, and more honest apartment, a place of my own making, filled with light and books and the happy, chaotic presence of my daughter, Chloe. My father, unwilling to live alone in the grand house in Bordeaux, moved into a beautiful flat just a few blocks away. Our small, broken family, now a unit of 3, became a new, stronger, and more resilient structure. My work as an architect was reborn. I left the world of opulent, private residences, the world of designing beautiful cages for the wealthy. I opened my own, smaller firm, and we focused on public projects. Community centers, libraries, schools for underprivileged children.
I found a new, profound joy in creating structures that served not the vanity of the few, but the needs of the many. My new passion project became a design for a new cultural and arts center in Ho Chi Minh City, a building that would celebrate the vibrant, resilient spirit of the Vietnamese people. The project was a challenge, a joy, and a way of connecting with a wider, more authentic world. It was the most meaningful work of my career. Today is October 5th. It is the anniversary of the day my 5-year-old daughter walked up to me and with a single innocent question detonated my entire world. I am standing on the balcony of my apartment, a cup of coffee in my hand, looking out at the familiar, beautiful skyline of Paris. Chloe is a teenager now, a bright, strong, and wonderfully honest young woman. My father is healthy and happy. My life is quiet, purposeful, and for the first time in a very long time, it is built on a foundation of solid, unshakable truth. I sometimes think about my life's work, about the art of architecture. A building I know can be beautiful on the surface, a masterpiece of facade and ornamentation, but if its foundation is weak, if it is built on a lie, it is not a sanctuary. It is a death trap, doomed to an eventual, inevitable collapse. My marriage to Luke was a beautiful, fraudulent building. My new life, the one I have designed and built with my daughter and my father, is a smaller, simpler structure. It is less grand, less dazzling, but it is honest. It is strong. It is built on the unbreakable bedrock of truth and a clear-eyed, conditional love. I, the architect, had to see my own life demolished to understand the difference between a beautiful design and a strong foundation. And I have learned that the most beautiful structures are not the ones that reach for the sky, but the ones that are, from the ground up, completely and utterly authentic.